Hi, welcome everybody. Hi, Andrea.
Hello, Erin. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good to see you. Hi, Andrew. Hi, Shelley. Come, I just talked to you guys yesterday. Andrew, how's the camera situation? Hey, there you are.
Wow, and the microphone situation. Yep, got it figured out.
Awesome. Great. Let's see. We've got a few more people coming in here. I have gotten multiple messages this morning from people who, Andrea, you can probably relate to this. They're like, I'm sick. Can I get the replay? Will there be a recording? So we've got lots of people coming or looking for the recording later here, but hi, Noreen, or maybe it's Mary. Could be either one of them from their organization, but we will get started in just a minute as soon as I know that these guys have joined, and it is Noreen. Hi. Welcome, Noreen. So I want to make sure that we're timely because we are recording and I have lots of things to say. We've got lots of content to cover today. So I'm sure people will join us as we come in. If you have to drop off, like I said, I will send out a recording and I'll send out, I've got a marketing strategy template and I'll send out the slides and everything, all of the resources together via email after this. So feel free to come and go as you need to. I'm a paper notes person to try to keep myself on topic because I always have so many things to say and I get so excited. So got my notes here, but what we are going to do today, let's see, I'm going to start sharing my screen here. We're going to cover a lot of ground. Let's see, one second here. Oh. The Zoom things are always in the way. There we go. Okay. So we're going to cover a lot of ground. The goal of the workshop today is to help nonprofit leaders craft mission-driven messaging that inspires support, that builds trust, and strengthens relationships during challenging times. So I am going to, I just realized I have to be able to see if other people come in. So let's make sure we can do that. Let's start off here maybe with a quick poll. If you feel comfortable sharing, what is either the biggest communication challenge that your organization's facing right now, or if it's not the biggest challenge, what is a challenge, a big challenge that you're facing, things that you're trying to figure out in your communications right now? As I try to figure out here how to see the chat at the same time as sharing my screen. Let's see here. Okay. All right, I think that I can see it now. So as we go through today, what we're not going to talk about really is quick fix fundraising gimmick type of things. We're focusing on sustainable long-term strategies. We want to connect with our supporters and with our donors and not just have this crisis panic session. We will address, of course, challenges that are coming up right now, or in general, what do we do when there's a crisis? But every organization has a different situation right now. Some are really in crisis with their funding at the moment. Others are doing fine, but that doesn't mean that you'll never run into a crisis, right? So the goal of today is to talk about how do we become confident in our communications so that there is, even when there is a crisis, we know how to communicate, we have a plan. It's not to put more panic and stress or to focus on that at the moment. And then this is also not going to be just something that you implement one time. Like I said, not a quick fix. We're setting you up and your organization up for the long term. So you're resilient and you can weather the crises. I've seen a lot of crises over my time in the nonprofit world. And so we want a plan in place to be able to weather those well. Let's see. How to get our message to the right people. Yes, Noreen, that is definitely the question. Make sure we're communicating correctly to all of our audiences, to donors. Explain how we're making an impact in a clear and engaging way. So thank you. I think we'll address all of those things today. So, okay, let's talk about the reality that nonprofits are facing today. So as we know, it's a difficult time in the nonprofit world, not for every single nonprofit, but a lot of nonprofits are feeling the squeeze right now. I'm hearing all the time, donor fatigue is real. People feel like they have less money to give than they had 5 years ago for, different reasons, economics, lots of things. People are just saying we don't have as much to give. I'm hearing over and over, our biggest donors are getting older. And so then we have this concern for longevity and sustainability in finances when we don't know how much longer they'll be around. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty around grants and funding, especially on the federal level right now. So all of this together makes how you market yourself and your messaging more important right now than ever. So while we want to acknowledge the difficulty and the stress of the current moment for a lot of organizations, I also want to make sure that we acknowledge that in these moments of crisis and stress, we have the opportunity to show kindness and transparency and authenticity, and to connect with donors, both current ones and future donors and supporters, in a way that we never have before, if we're intentional about it. Even if we're in a good place now, there's always more that we can do to move forward with resilience and have a stronger organization, right? As I saw a bunch of different marketing analysis things about after the Super Bowl, about the Super Bowl commercials and the marketing, biggest marketing day in America, probably in the world, right? I saw these stats that said that 86% of people say that brand transparency is more important than ever right now. And 75% of people say that they're willing to pay more for products that guarantee transparency. So we can apply this to our supporters and nonprofit donors as well. Like, people are asking for, those are pretty staggering numbers. They're saying we want this transparency, we want authenticity. So let's talk about today how we can tell our story in those clear and authentic ways that align with what people want. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Erin Terbeest. I now can officially say I've been in the nonprofit sector for 20 years. I started as a social worker. I was in a community action agency. I've worked for several years in that capacity. And then I kind of pivoted when I had kids, stayed in the nonprofit world in volunteer and consulting roles, and then transitioned to marketing. So I'm the founder of Crane Crest Communications and C3 Marketing for Nonprofits. I help nonprofits craft impactful messaging and marketing strategies. And I do live in rural Wisconsin with my husband and 2 kids, who you see there. Maybe I'm actually not seeing the picture on my end for some reason right now. We'll see. Maybe you see them. But people always ask me when I say rural Wisconsin, like, do you have cows? We do have cows. So it's all the stereotypical, like, Wisconsin farm things that you could picture. Let's see here. So where are we going today? We are going to start, of course, we're going to talk about crisis communications, but we're going to start even before that with the foundation, which is mission clarity and strategic alignment, and then the building blocks of an effective marketing strategy. Because when we have this in place, or we are able to put it in place in a time of crisis, if we don't have it in place beforehand, then there isn't a lot that you have to alter. You know what your messaging is, you know who you're talking to, so you can easily use your current strategy to talk about the crisis, to explain it, to bring it to your audience and say, hey, here's where we are right now. You know who we are, you know our messaging, and this is what you can do to help us. So we're going to put those foundation pieces in place. Then we'll talk about a few things that are key for crisis times to think through. I'll talk about a couple questions that have been coming up a lot with nonprofits that I'm talking to lately. And then we will talk about marketing for long-term resilience, some things to think about there, and have Q&A. So if you have clarifying questions or comments as I go, feel free to drop them in the chat. I can see the chat kind of pop up. So I'll check in with it from time to time, but we'll also have a dedicated time at the end for more in-depth questions or more specific questions. And if you are watching on the recording and you have a question for me, feel free, my contact information, you'll have it, it'll be on here. Feel free to reach out and I will definitely answer for you. So let's start with mission clarity and strategic alignment. So it might seem obvious or basic to say that mission clarity is non-negotiable, but you would actually be surprised how many people I talk to who don't have this for their organization. So your mission, your organization's like main goal, what you are setting out to accomplish is your North Star. It's going to be your North Star in a crisis and always. So it's going to be something that you use to guide your marketing efforts, like you're directing your marketing efforts with it. It helps you make communication decisions about what you're going to say or not say, when you're going to say it, how you're going to say it. It's not just like a fluffy feel-good statement. Although sometimes we do see mission statements that are like that, but this is your mission, your main goal, even if it's not explicitly stated in your mission statement, if you have more of the fluffy variety, the reason that your organization exists, that main goal. So when I'm talking mission, that's what I'm talking about. That's going to be our guiding North Star for everything that we do. It helps us decide where to focus our efforts because, as we all know, there are a million different things you can do when it comes to marketing, right? For nonprofits, we could do, social media, we can do print media, we can do emails. You could go on and on forever. We've got huge marketing teams all across the world with multinational corporations, hundreds of people doing marketing. In a nonprofit, we usually don't have that, right? We've maybe got 1 or 2 people that are working on our marketing. And so we're going to use our mission to help align what we're doing and prioritize the tasks that are going to make the most impact and strengthen our marketing. So we can focus on the effort or the activities that, get us the farthest or move us closest to our goals. Okay, as we go through today, building the foundations of your marketing strategy and plan, we're going to talk about this totally fictional organization that we made up. When I was thinking about this, I thought about using some real organizations as examples, but I also don't like to throw anybody under the bus because it's really easy to find when you know what you're looking for, organizations who aren't doing this. So I figured it was easier and safer just to say, let's make up an organization. So we have Safe Haven Animal Rescue that we are going to talk about today. And their mission is to rescue, rehabilitate, and find loving homes for abandoned and neglected animals while promoting responsible pet ownership. So if we're talking about lining up your marketing activities, your time, your efforts, everything that you're doing for marketing with your mission, an on-mission marketing effort for them that's aligned with that North Star is for them to launch a campaign. They call it their Rescue to Home campaign. And it features transformative stories of animals they've saved and showing that journey from like, we found this neglected animal and then we rehabilitated it and then we adopted it out to a great home, like this transformational story. They can highlight the impact of the donations that people make for them, encourage people to foster and adopt, share educational content about responsible pet ownership. It's this big campaign that encompasses all of their mission, right? So it increases adoptions and community involvement. It secures funding for their rescue efforts. That would be an on-mission marketing strategy for them. Off-mission would be if we say a local environmental group in the same community comes to them and says, hey, we really want to do this huge community cleanup day. We're going to focus on reducing plastic waste to protect wildlife. I can see, this is a great cause, right? And the people at Safe Haven Animal Rescue love animals. And so of course they want to protect wildlife. People in the nonprofit space often have really big hearts. And so it's easy to say, like, yes, that sounds great. We'd love to help. But this is a distraction from their mission for their organization, right? It's valuable, but it doesn't directly align with their mission. Participating would divert their resources, their time, everything away from their adoption efforts and possibly kind of confuse donors and supporters about what their core focus is. It just becomes more murky. So when they're spending time, marketing, making social media posts, making flyers, sending emails about this off-mission thing, that means they're not talking about or raising money for the things that are their mission. So the lesson here, when we're just looking at a big picture, are we mission aligned here, is by keeping their marketing aligned with their mission, which is animal rescue and adoption. Even though they love wildlife, that's not their mission. Safe Haven ensures that their efforts stay focused and they can maximize their impact and strengthen donor trust and engagement. So I know that this seems like a very basic place to start, but it's really easy to overlook, to jump over this first step because it seems obvious. Well, of course I know what our goals are. I know why we're doing this. We all have big hearts though and want to help. And so we really need this to help us drive our focus. Let me check our here just in case. I think it only shows me the chat if things pop up. We'll see. If I'm missing things in the chat, I'm very sorry, but I promise we will come back. I'll check it at the end when I can stop screen sharing, and then we'll be able to go back and address them. So what if your mission isn't clear? Like I said, this actually comes up a lot more than you would think, not having a clear mission. There are a lot of different places that you can go in your mission to find kind of that North Star or to figure out like what are those overarching organizational goals that you have if they're not explicitly stated. Like if your mission statement just says something really generic in general, or if, you know, I've come across organizations that don't have a mission statement. There are a lot of places you can look. Maybe you have a strategic plan. Maybe it's not, you know, an official strategic plan written out saying these are our goals for the next 5 years, but you can go to the leadership in your organization and know, or you ask them like, what are our key areas of focus right now? So if you're unsure of exactly what that mission is, or if it's so diluted that you can't articulate it, like really quickly, it just rolls off your tongue, then that's where you need to start. Before we get into any more marketing strategy or tactics, or, you know, how do we increase our following on social media, you have to start by effectively marketing with your whole team, being able to say, this is our goal. This is exactly what we're working towards. Here's our North Star. If this is where you find yourself as an organization right now, like there's absolutely no shame there. I talk to a lot of people who are in this boat, and I always just say, realizing that this is where you are, that you have been kind of marketing scattershot without a goal, without like a focus in mind, that's just information that you have now. So you can take it and you know where to start. Step one is effectively like finding that goal so you can line up your communication with it and then make a bigger impact. So question here, do you feel like you have clear and defined organizational goals that you can align your marketing strategy with? Or do you feel like this is something that you need to work on? I would say if it's not an immediate yes for you, then the answer is maybe a no or a maybe. But we want to get to a yes, where yes, I know exactly what our goals are and how I am lining up my marketing strategy with that. Something to think about there. And this will be a test to see if I see the chat popping up or not. So I'm going to take a drink real quick. Okay. Great. And then we are going to move on to the building blocks of a successful marketing strategy. So once we're really clear about our mission and our organizational goals, then the next step is to develop a strategic marketing plan that ensures that every communication effort that we're making aligns with our goals. Because when it's all aligned, then we're not wasting time, we're not wasting resources, we're not being ineffective or diluting our message. We're just really like focused and driven and driving the most possible impact. So a marketing strategy has these 6 key components, which we are going to go through each of these steps today. I've created a template that is like marketing strategy plan template for nonprofits for you. So I will send that out. I'll link it to you at the end here. So you can go through and actually work through your own marketing strategy, talking about, you know, your goals, your audience, messaging, tactics, timeline, metrics. We'll put all of those things together to make a plan for you that you can then work from. Because like I said, this is the foundation. Even though this isn't directly, what do I do in the time of crisis because we just found out we lost, you know, all of this funding or something like that. This needs to be in place even before we start sending out messages to our supporters saying, oh my gosh, like we're in panic mode, help us. So this is step 1 here. Okay. We already talked about aligning our marketing strategy with the overall organizational goals, right? So goals, again, like going back to the animal rescue example, if their mission is to find homes for more rescue animals, then they don't want to spend weeks making posts and emails and webpage banners and flyers about a local cleanup event. It's a distraction from their goal. And instead, they want to use that time to launch a campaign with all those same elements, the social media posts, the flyers, the webpage banners, that successfully tells the story of rescue animals from the time that they were rescued to when they got their new homes, and share those things, those posts and emails and everything that they're using are sharing the impact that donors made along the way and encouraging more donations because they're effectively sharing their story. So our marketing should always support and point back to those organizational goals. Every time somebody says, do you think this is a good idea or should we do this? Would this be a smart marketing move for us? I say, does this marketing effort support your mission or does it distract you from your goals? So goals, that is step one. Once you have them figured out, it's not that they never change, obviously, from year to year or quarter to quarter, like things evolve. So the marketing strategy isn't meant to be, this is set in stone forever, never changing, but it is a thing that you want to revisit. But once you have your goals, they're not going to change every week or even every month for the most part. Like, you know where you're going and what your focus is. So that's step one. Step two, then, is knowing your audience. Most nonprofits have more than one target audience that they're talking to. Maybe you're talking to donors or potential donors, and maybe you're talking to the people that you serve, because a lot of nonprofits are serving people. But the more that we can identify who it is that we're talking to, what they're interested in, why they might care about your organization, what inspires them to support you, what might potentially stop them from, supporting you, coming to an event, giving you money, how to talk to them, like what's going to appeal to them emotionally. The more that we can figure that out about who we're talking to, the more likely we are to be able to connect effectively with the right people. We all like the idea that anyone and everyone could support our organization or donate to our organization, which in theory, sure, but literally no one is for everyone, right? So if we look at our animal rescue, Safe Haven Animal Rescue, they're talking to people who love animals. That's their target audience, right? Maybe somebody who's already adopted, or they would like to adopt a pet, or they know somebody else who had a really great experience with it. They could say, well, we're probably talking to people who have a home of their own. You have to have a place to put a pet. We're probably talking to someone who's established out on their own. It's maybe not a 19-year-old who's in college. It seems less likely that they're going to be, looking for a pet to adopt or in the market for that or thinking about that than somebody who's maybe 25 and they're on their own and they're like, hey, it sounds great to have a cat, they are not talking to me if I'm like, I'm just not an animal person. That's not part of my personal values. It's, doesn't make me a bad person if I'm not their audience, or I don't love animals, or my kid's allergic to pet dander. And so I know that I could never adopt one or something like that. It just means that I'm not their audience. And so they don't need to be talking to me. The less generic that we make our messaging and the more we focus on talking to the people who are the most likely to care about our organization, then the more effective we can be, because it feels more personal. You don't need the whole world, right? You just need to make fans and loyal supporters out of the right people. So we've got our goals, we know who we're talking to, we've got our audience. Next, we've got to talk about messaging. And there's a lot that goes into messaging strategy, and we don't have, I could talk about messaging strategy for days. I don't think any of you want that from me right now. But really it comes down to how you tell your story. Storytelling is definitely a buzzword in the marketing world right now. I'm sure that you hear it and see it everywhere, but we're all driven by story. That's just how humans operate. So telling your story well is vital. What we need to think about when we're working on a marketing strategy, or sorry, not marketing, a messaging strategy. Like, what are we going to say to these people? We know now who we're talking to, but what are we saying to them to achieve these goals? We need to come up with kind of some key content pillars. They're almost like buckets or like little segments of messaging that are just key things that we want them to hear over and over again from us. What's really important for them to understand about our organization? What are misconceptions that they might have about our work that we want to make sure that we clear up in our messaging? Where are they lacking knowledge about us? What will connect to them on an emotional level? This doesn't mean that you have to keep telling the same stories over and over again. Your content pillars aren't going to be like, here's a story about Daisy the dog, and here's the story about Kathy the cat. Those aren't going to be your content pillars. It's going to be more broad buckets. I'll show you some examples in just a minute for Safe Haven that let you tell your story through these things. But the fun thing, as you come up with your content pillars and start using that to make all of your content around and to really direct your messaging, is over time, you'll start to hear your audience and your supporters repeating them back to you. And that's when you know that you're really doing it effectively. They might not say it word for word the way that you have it written down on your paper, but you'll start to hear the same thing. So let's look at some examples here for the Safe Haven Animal Rescue. Their core messaging pillars are rescue to forever home. So this is a pillar where they can share those transformation stories, show, oh, look at this, like Daisy the dog. Is somebody said, like, we found Daisy and somebody brought her in, and look at, she was sick and hurt, and we rehabilitated her, and then we found her this home, and look at like her brand new family. This is amazing. That's the pillar that they can use for that. Another pillar of theirs is community and volunteers. So they're highlighting like the people who foster the animals. They're highlighting, the volunteers that come in and help give the dogs baths and whatever the volunteers are doing there. And the ways that people can get involved, because they need a lot of volunteer help and hands on deck to help with their organization. Another pillar, because again, this ties back into their mission, they said that they want to educate people about responsible pet ownership. So that pet care and education becomes one of their pillars. They can give training tips, spay and neuter awareness, things like that. And impact and transparency. This is how they like show people, when you make a donation of this, or, when you give us money, this is where it goes. And this is how we use it. Here is the impact that happens with your donations. And then advocacy and animal welfare. Again, all of these are tying back to their mission, to their organizational goals. But we're hoping that over time, as they create content, and they tell the story about, they've got this beautiful video that's got pictures and video of Daisy the dog with her new family, like kind of before and after type of things. And then they have a different post or email or something that talks about the volunteers that helped to rehabilitate Daisy. And here's all the things that they did to help get her ready to go to a new home and stuff. They are using that same story, but fitting it into the different content pillars. And then eventually they start to hear people saying like, oh yeah, you're looking for a pet, you should go to Safe Haven Animal Rescue. Did you know, like, these are all the amazing things that they do. And they have like volunteers that come in and do all of this stuff. They help teach people about how to be responsible pet owners, or they say, they have classes, free classes for after you've adopted an animal to help them get used to your new home. You start to hear people saying, like, basically repeating these pillars back to you. So that's why it's important to pick things that are like, this is really the core of our message and who we are and what we want people to know about us, because we're, again, tying them all back to our mission and to our goals. So no, this is a lot. I mean, marketing strategy is like, we could take a whole college course about marketing strategy, and we're doing it in 20 minutes here. But again, I will have the template and the resources. And if you have questions, or as you're going through it, if you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense, or what am I supposed to do here? Please do reach out. I promise I will answer any emails, messages that I get about this, because I am very passionate about helping nonprofits to make sure that they have a strategy in place that's aligned so they can be as effective as possible. So, one second here. We've talked about your goals. We talked about your audience. We talked about your message. So now we have all those things in place. We know what we're saying. We know who we're saying it to. We know why we're saying it. You know, those are our goals, where we're heading. Now we've got to choose our tactics, choose the platforms that we're going to use. This is the what, where we come to the what part of how we're telling our story. What types of content will you create? What, social media platforms will you use? What types of events will you hold this year? You literally can't do everything, right? We can't be in all places at once. We don't have those huge content marketing teams, but we can prioritize and be really intentional about the things that are going to have the most impact. And then that can expand over time as it makes sense, as our team grows, as our own knowledge and capacity grows, because we've honed in on this strategy and we know exactly what we're doing and we're so efficient with our time. It can expand over time, but we want to prioritize. So as we're thinking about tactics, I always encourage organizations to just do a brain dump. What are all the possibilities? Where does our target audience already hang out? Whether that's online, what are they on Facebook? Are they on LinkedIn? Are they on Blue Sky? Are they, there are so many different options of places that you can go online for social media platforms. Are they checking their email every day? Maybe they're not online so much, or maybe they are in Discord communities. Maybe they really are connecting to us through in-person events, through volunteering. Asking those questions and putting all of the options on the table. Where is our target audience already hanging out? Where are they spending time? What organizations are they connected to in the community? Are they, especially if you're local, do they frequent the local coffee shop? Where do we find them? And then paired with that, like, what experience? So you've got all of these options on the table. Here are things that we could do throughout the year. You have to think about, what experience does your team have that makes one platform make sense over another? Or, maybe I don't know anything about how to post on Facebook, but I'm really good at X or Twitter or something like that. And we're trying to decide, okay, do we really want to go all in on both of these platforms or one of them? Like, your experience is going to matter when it comes to how easy it is to implement a tactic, right? So take into consideration, like, what experience that you have, what knowledge do you already have, or that you can gain the most easily to make your job as easy as possible. So if you prioritize where your people are and the knowledge that you have to make things happen, then it makes it so you can pick things that you can actually get done and implement without being totally overwhelmed, but also that are going to be effective in reaching the right people. So you don't want to have a huge list of tactics. We're not trying, if we prioritize everything, if everything's a priority, nothing is a priority, right? Is that the same? So you want to come up with like 3 to 5. So this animal rescue, let's say that they have decided they really want to focus on growing their email list and communicating more regularly there, because an email list, I think that that's kind of a go-to for all organizations. You own that list. You can communicate with people, get directly in front of them in their inbox. So you don't have to worry about any algorithms or anything like that. So they want to focus on that. It's a thing they know how to do, or they can pretty easily learn how to navigate their email software and send out these emails. So that's a priority for them this year. They've also decided that they want to prioritize Instagram. They've looked at all of their different, and I'm not saying that you have to prioritize Instagram. I'm just saying that this fictional nonprofit has decided that Instagram is what makes sense, because their target audience is on Instagram. They have a lot of video and photo content that's really compelling, and that works really well on Instagram. And so they want to go all in on that. Not that they'll never use another social media platform or anything, but that's where they're really focusing on and prioritizing this year. And then they have an in-person event that they do every year. It's a big adoption event. There are tons of donors. People come, they get to meet all the animals. It's a success every year. And they've decided this has always been a really great event for us. We want to go all in on promoting it and growing it. those are their top 3 tactics. It doesn't mean that nothing else happens, that they never work on any other platforms, but it just helps, again, with that focus. Because we've got our goal, we've got our audience, we've got our message. Now we know our focus, what tactics we're really working on. So then once we have all of those things in place, we can just work on mapping them out. Like, what is your timeline here? It's this one in some ways is more self-explanatory, because it's just how are you going to stay on track with all of your goals and with your marketing initiatives? If you plan ahead and you have them scheduled out on your calendar, then you have the ultimate impact. Not only because you know what you're doing each day when you come into work, or each week you're looking at the calendar and like, yes, this is what I need to be working on. You know, this is what's going on this week. You're not losing track, and you're not scrambling last minute like, oh my gosh, that event really snuck up on me. It's only 2 weeks away and we've hardly done any, promotion for it. You've got it marked out on your calendar to start 3 months beforehand, promoting the event, reaching out to the people that you need to communicate with to work on those promotions. So as you sit down with your calendar, because I actually think that you should sit down, whether you use a digital calendar or a paper one, and map things out, put those tasks on your calendar, mark out those key dates. Okay, we know we have this event at this time. We know that we're going to send out an end of year fundraising letter, and this is the week that we want it to go out. And then work backwards too. Put those reminders on and say like, hey, 1 month beforehand, I need a reminder that I've got to get going on this. But we also want to ask things about like, how often are we posting on social media? When are we sending emails? When do we sit down and write those? How often are we sending them? When do you revisit your website every month and make any adjustments? Because, websites can be neglected pretty easily if you don't have a person who that's their job. If we mark all of those things out, even on our calendar, like, okay, every Monday morning I sit down and for 2 hours, I create and schedule our social media content for the week, and it's done. You don't have to think about it, and it doesn't become a scramble or an afterthought, right? So map all of our goals out to our timeline. We are implementing, we're effective. We know what we're saying, we're connecting with the right people. The final part of our marketing strategy then is our metrics, measuring what matters. So this is the step that I see get skipped the most often. And I think it's due to time constraints, because we know in the nonprofit world, we always have that overwhelm. Where do I even start? What do I track? How does this work? Or I think a lot of times just people in the nonprofit world are people, and they're not necessarily numbers people or spreadsheet people. And so this just isn't their thing. And it's not my thing either. I am not naturally a numbers person at all, but I have seen over time and am more and more convinced of how important it is to track metrics. By tracking the right metrics, you know what's actually working, so you can keep doing those things, like spend your time doing those things that are working and stop doing the things that aren't making any impact. If you're posting on Facebook 5 times a day and you're seeing, what, nobody's even seeing these posts. I'm only getting 1 like, we're not getting any donations, we're not getting any link clicks. Like, this isn't really doing anything for us. Why spend your time doing it, right? Just because maybe somebody said it's a good idea to post on Facebook 5 times a day doesn't mean it's working for your organization. And you only know what's working and what's not working if you're tracking that. So you don't have to track every single number by any means. There are lots of resources out there about important things to track for nonprofits. Like a quick Google search will give you all kinds of things, engagement rates on social media accounts, conversion rates on your donation pages on your website, how many hours you spend on this project or that project. There are so many different things that you can track. But you want to find the metrics that are going to most effectively help you tell your story. So what's going to be the most meaningful to your donors? Like, what are they actually going to want to hear about when it comes to metrics? The animal rescue might say, like, we rescued this many animals this year, or we rehomed this many animals this year. They were adopted into their forever families. Those are the kinds of numbers that, donors and your supporters are going to want to hear. You also have to think about your board members or, potential grants and funders, things like that. You are going to have to do a little bit of work in thinking to track the metrics that make sense for your organization. But when you do this, even though, maybe that hour that you have to sit down because you've marked it out on your calendar every month to sit down for an hour and track all your metrics, maybe it's not very fun, but it helps you to do your job so much better. And really, it shouldn't take much more than an hour per month. I have the last Friday of every month marked out to do analytics and metrics for myself and all my clients. Is it my favorite day of work every month? No, but does it give me a lot of really helpful information? Yes. So that is, so much information, marketing strategy in half an hour, right? But I always want to make sure people know it's never too late to start. Ideally, we would have a marketing strategy with all of these elements in place before a crisis strikes, before there's a big problem or stressful event that we have to deal with. We know we don't always live in an ideal world, but it's never too late to put it into place. Even if you don't have it in place right now, even if you're feeling like you're in a crisis situation and you don't have this in place right now, you can still, you can put this into place. You can go through this template that I'll give you and prepare your organization for how you need to communicate right now and for that long-term resiliency and growth that you need by implementing all of this. So that's marketing strategy. I'm going to do a quick check here, make sure that we've got something that I need to figure out, if there's a way to actually present and see the chat at the same time on Zoom, because I don't want to miss things if anybody's asking questions or saying anything, but we'll check in at the end. Okay. Oh, there's the chat thing popping up. Yes, I do need to do a Zoom test. You're right, Noreen. I never think about it until I'm like in the moment, and then I wish that I would have done that. Okay, so crisis communication essentials. That's hard to say. So what do we do when things get difficult? Whether we've got lost funding, we have donor fatigue, whatever the organizational crisis or stress is that we're going through. What are some things that we need to think about? Obviously, one of the first things that we need to think about is that marketing strategy. Whether you have one and you just need to revisit it and say, okay, here's our current situation. How does it fit into our overall goals, into our messaging, those content pillars? How do we use that we already are working from to talk to our supporters, our audience? Or if you don't have it in place, that's a step one, like we just talked about. Some other things to think about, though, are thoughtfully increasing communication. I am talking to a lot of organizations right now that are saying, we just lost all of our funding for this program or for that or whatever, and we need money now. I've talked to organizations that are like, I need to raise $50,000 in the next 2 weeks or something like that. And that feels really overwhelming. So it's going to take more communication. We have to tell our donors what's going on, but we also have to find that, strike the right balance between the frequency of communication and overwhelming them. So something that we want to think about when we're thinking about increasing our communications is, first of all, how often is our audience used to hearing from you? If you were sending an email once a quarter, and then all of a sudden you're sending them emails every single day, that might be a little overwhelming. I have a feeling you're going to see a lot of unsubscribes from something like that. Or if you are thinking, okay, this is really an emergency situation, and so we need to make phone calls to our donors, they might be fine with getting one phone call, or maybe if you don't answer it the first time, maybe getting a follow-up phone call or something. But the norm isn't to, have an organization calling you every single day to ask you for money. So we kind of have to think about the platforms and what their norms are, because a phone call is going to be different from an email, which is going to be different from social media, where you can post as many times as you want throughout the day, right? If they start to see on your social media, that's the easiest way to increase communication. But if they start to see, well, they posted 10 times yesterday and every single one was just some variation of give me money, give me money, give me money, again, like, that's going to be overwhelming. It's going to be probably a turnoff. But we can use our metrics. We can use feedback that we're getting from our donors and supporters about how often they want to hear from us, what they want to hear from us, what questions they're asking. We can do kind of like social listening. What are people coming into your office? If you have a physical office, what are they asking about? What are they calling and asking you? Talk to the person who answers the phone. They at your organization, they will know a lot about what people want to know, what they want to hear right now. And then you also have to think about like, what capacity do you have as an organization right now as your guide for how often to communicate and how to increase your communication. Some audiences are going to respond better than others to more communication. Like we said, different platforms have different norms, but what we really want to avoid is having that donor overwhelmed. If you start to get the sense that donors are feeling overwhelmed, they don't know what to do, or they're like, I already gave, I don't have anything else to give right now. What you can do is still increase your communication, but focus on the impact that your organization is having, that donations have, and not just ask for more, because that can also help to continue to get your message out and maybe reach new people without overwhelming. So as we talked about, honest, clear, authentic communication builds trust, especially when things are challenging or stressful. When you have some transparency in your messaging, it reassures your donors and supporters, but how you frame it really matters. So what to say and what not to say when you're doing crisis messaging. So what to say, we want to acknowledge the situation clearly and concisely. Like, here's what's happening right now. We lost funding for this program, and here's what it means for our organization. We don't need to give them all the deals or all the details. Kind of, they don't need to know, how's the sausage made in the back room, but they do need to know, like, here's what's going on, here's why it matters to us. And then we want to explain, here's what we're doing to address the challenge. If they know that, it gives them, again, there's that transparency, there's that authenticity, and there's that trust in your leadership. Like, okay, they've got a plan. They know what they're doing here. All they need is a little extra funding, a little extra help. Like, maybe I can give them $50 this week because this is compelling to me. I really care about this organization, and I see that they're handling this really stressful situation in a really like confident and competent way. So not all the details, but we want to share what we're doing and tell people how they can help. Keep your messaging really mission focused. Use those content pillars. Think about, what is that mission? What is that overall goal? And the solutions. Like, be solutions oriented and not, I want to say not problem oriented. Sometimes we do need to say, this is a problem. Again, acknowledge the challenge. But we don't want to harp on this is the problem, because that is going to turn people away. So what to avoid going along with that, avoid overloading your supporters with all of the details that are, excessive details, uncertainty. They don't want to hear all of that. They don't respond well to alarmist language or really desperate language. Like, that's going to alienate people. If I have actually seen nonprofits posting in the last month or so, I guess it's been like 3 or 4 weeks now since the news about government funding stuff hit. I've seen them posting and saying, if we don't raise like X amount of dollars today, then we're going to have to close our doors. Like, that's not what we want to be doing. We don't want to be panicky, alarmist. We don't want to make promises or commitments, whether positive or negative ones. Like, we are going to have to close our doors that we're not sure we can fulfill, or that we're not sure are going to happen. And we also don't want to just ignore the issue altogether. Silence can create mistrust, and especially if it's something that is really big, it's all over the news, people are talking about it, they're going to wonder. You will get calls, you'll get questions, you'll get people sending you messages on Facebook asking about it. So the goal is overall to provide calm and mission-driven communication that informs, engages, and reassures your audience, while also maintaining their confidence in your organization's leadership. So it's really not that different than how you're communicating normally, except for maybe communicating a little more, telling them what the challenge is that you're facing, but we're sticking to that mission-driven messaging and those content pillars. Okay, another question that has come up multiple times in the last few weeks, not only because of, changes in announcements and things like that from the government, but also because there's been a lot of movement and a lot of turmoil with social media platforms lately. And so I wanted to address this because it's come up so many times lately. Multiple organizations asking, like, should I leave this platform? Should I leave this social media platform because it doesn't align with my organization's values? And it's all across the board. People are asking about X or Twitter. They're asking about the Meta platforms, Facebook and Instagram. They're asking about TikTok. This, of course, is going to be a very case-by-case type of choice for every organization, but it should be a really intentional one. What I don't want to see is a knee-jerk reaction where it's like, oh my gosh, the CEO of this company said this or did this thing, so we are pulling all of our stuff off of this platform tomorrow. That's not what we want. We want careful evaluation before we make a decision. And even if the decision is, this doesn't make sense for our organization anymore, it's not aligned, it's not going to work for us long-term, we want to have an exit plan. So we will talk about in just a moment here, like a platform proof strategy, which ensures that your messaging is effective across multiple platforms and channels and helps you diversify. So, you aren't reduced to depending on just one specific platform. But if this is a thing that you're thinking of as an organization, or if it's a thing that's crossed your mind, like, do I want to continue to be on this platform? Do I want to support this platform? Are my supporters staying on this platform? Here's some things to think about. First of all, assess the platform's role. Does it help you achieve your goals? Like, hopefully you have some metrics, or even if you haven't historically tracked metrics, you can, on the social media platforms, go in and look at your insights and say, is it helping you achieve your goals? Are people engaging with you here? That's one thing to consider. If you leave, are there alternatives? Like, do you have a way to connect with the supporters that are there? Say you have 2,000 people that follow you on Facebook. If you left Facebook tomorrow, do you have another way to talk to those 2,000 people? Do you also have their emails? Like, have you funneled them toward your email list so you could reach out to them that way? Have you directed them to another platform where you'll be posting instead? Email list is always, I think, a good idea to prioritize because you own that. Like I mentioned before, you retain like direct communication without having to worry about algorithms or platforms and what they're doing. But that takes time to build and grow, right? So if you decide that, yep, you know what, we need to leave, let's plan a thoughtful transition. Migrate your followers gradually to your email list, to another platform. Don't just disappear overnight. It might take several months or a year, but even if you feel like, what, we really need to get off of here, or our supporters are saying you need to get off of this platform because this is no longer aligned and we don't want to see you here because we don't believe in this platform. That's pretty extreme, obviously, but it is the case for some organizations right now. If you say, okay, we've heard you, we have evaluated, we agree, like this is not the place for us anymore, but we are going to take, X amount of months or X amount of time to make an exodus, to migrate, so we can make sure that we bring our supporters with us and we don't lose those people. I also want to balance that with let's look at actual trends. So even if you're seeing in the news, you're hearing people talk about everyone's leaving platform XYZ or whatever it is, mass exodus from any social media platform is pretty rare. A lot of supporters may leave, or some of your supporters may leave for whatever reason from different platforms. I mean, that's happening all the time. But at the same time, a lot of them will probably stay. So leaving could make you lose access to them. Really, your success on any platform ultimately comes down to your strategy and your messaging, as we've talked about. So with strong storytelling and community building, you can engage your supporters wherever you are and wherever you decide makes sense. We do want to think about building a strategy that is platform proof, because as we know, social media changes, that landscape changes, and your strategy should be adaptable and work across different platforms. They're all, I mean, it's supposed to be social, right? So they're all about stories and human connection, and no single platform is essential. Obviously, if you back up, I don't know what, more than 15 years now, almost 20 years to the beginning of social media, we only had a few options, everybody was on Facebook. And yes, there are still billions of people on Facebook, but there are also a lot of other options. And I think it's safe to say that the future of social media is a lot more diverse. Not everyone will be as concentrated in those same original platforms. There are more options, there are new ones that come out every day. So you have to, again, go back to like prioritizing your tactics. What's going to make the most sense? What is going to have the biggest impact? Where are we going to find our supporters? And let's focus on that. You can't control the platforms or their algorithms, which change all the time, or the decisions that their leadership, their CEOs make, but you can control your messaging. You can control how you reach your audience and where you invest your effort and how much effort you put on a certain platform. So a platform-proof content strategy, which is part of your bigger messaging and marketing strategy, ensures that you're attracting and converting and retaining supporters across multiple channels, and hopefully not just depending on one. So I know that is a side note for some organizations that don't have that on their radar, but because I had people specifically ask about that as they signed up here, and just have had lots of conversations about that in general, I wanted to make sure that we addressed it. So we've got the marketing strategy basics. We've got a few things to think about, like in the moment when you're wanting to panic and say, oh my gosh, everybody give us money, help, help, help. Because we're in crisis right now. We've talked about what we're doing right there in the moment. Now let's talk about like looking beyond the crisis to the long-term resilience. Because that's what we want. We want resilient marketing and fundraising, this foundation that ensures that our organization continues to thrive beyond just these short-term challenges. We want to stick around, right? So let's talk about long-term impact. Just a few things to think about. The first one kind of goes without saying. We want to continue to try to grow our audience. There's lots of ways we can do that. Obviously, we have, I do mostly digital marketing. Online community is the cheapest way, and a lot of times easiest and most effective way to communicate frequently with people. But we also have audience and ways to market with people offline, of course, too. So we want to continue to just reach more people. More visibility equals more support. But again, we want to prioritize those channels that make sense and use every opportunity to connect people back to us and grow our opt-ins. So I always tell people to think about like the web of communication with multiple different touch points. So if you have an in-person event, you're giving out some brochure or flyer there to people, thanking them for coming or whatever it is, there's a little thing on there with a QR code that says, follow us on whatever your main social media platform is, or sign up for our email list. Or when you're on social media, you're driving people to your email list, and you've just got this web where you're constantly connecting people to you, giving them lots of touch points in ways that they can engage with you, because a larger engaged audience with those multiple touch points both gives you more resilience, because you're diversifying all the different ways that they could hear from you and connect with you. But it scales your fundraising efforts, it scales your volunteerism, and just your overall impact. So that one kind of goes without saying, but it's important to talk about. Strengthening relationships, especially with donors. Appreciation builds loyalty. Again, these are things that we know, right? Nurturing your existing supporters by showing appreciation, highlighting their impact, which can be done online or offline. I do mostly digital marketing, but I also always say don't underestimate the power of a phone call with no ulterior motives, no ask, just a, hey, thank you for supporting us, or a handwritten thank you note, or just a how are you doing note, or a little something like that. We can think online and offline there. But it's in marketing, when you're selling things, they talk about how it's so much cheaper and easier to retain a customer than to get a new one. And it's the same way with donors. So really work on strengthening those relationships and let them know how much they mean to you. So you build that loyalty up. Personalized communication. This goes back to, again, those stats that we talked about at the beginning with authenticity and transparency. Like, people want to feel seen, they want to feel important. And so if we are, every single message is going out to our entire audience, we're emailing, say we have 10,000 people on our email list, and every single email that I write goes to all 10,000. That's going to feel more generic, not very targeted. But if I take a moment to think through it and tailor my messaging to segments within my audience based on maybe their past giving, maybe the ways that they've engaged with us, like, oh, this is a volunteer, this is a person who's come to this event before, or their interests, whatever it is that it makes sense for you and your organization to, like, whatever groups it makes sense for you to segment people into, the more that we can personalize our communication, the more people are going to connect with that and appreciate it. If you have like a donor CRM or an email software that does tags and things like that, you can really get in there and become very niche with what you do with those. There are like crazy amounts of tags that you can use, but you don't have to get really in the weeds with this either. It can be as simple as, this person has donated in the last year and this person has not, and changing the messaging up a little bit to say, like, hey, I see, Noreen, that you supported us last year and I'm so grateful for that. Thank you. Or like, hey, Noreen, like, thank you so much for your support in the past. Would you like to contribute again this year? It's just, sometimes little tweaks like that that make a person say, like, oh, they know me. They're paying attention. They know who I am here. So personalizing communication. And then again, not to beat a dead horse. Is that a saying? Sometimes I get these things mixed up. We want to regularly be tracking our results because we have our marketing strategy, but we want to continue to refine it to be more efficient and more effective based on the data that we get in. It's a living document, and we want it to get better over time because it makes our lives and our jobs easier. And then finally, diversifying revenue streams. I'm not a fundraiser. I'm not a development person, but just like we talked about diversifying platforms and reaching people in different ways, we want to diversify our funding and our revenue streams too. We don't want to just depend on one platform, or, we don't want to just depend on Mark Zuckerberg. We also don't want to depend on just these 3 like elderly donors for our sources of funding, right? That doesn't give us long-term resilience. Look at new options, monthly giving plans, annual subscriptions, special campaigns, new grants. You can get creative. There are a lot of ways out there. And again, this is not my like core area. I'm a marketer, not a fundraiser, but we know that not every revenue stream will work for every organization, but again, focus on the ones that align with your mission and your supporters and their interests, rather than trying to do all of them at once. So we've got a theme going here. And then as a marketer and a person who cares a lot about how you communicate with people and how they interact with you and engage with you online, please make sure that you optimize your donor experience. If you have a really clunky donation process, like if your donation page on your website requires you to click a million times, or it's hard to figure out how to make it work and stuff, that can cost you donors. It can cost you recurring donations. So you want to make sure whatever your tech stack is supports an easy and seamless giving experience online. And then you want to make sure that your offline donation process is just as smooth. But there are so many, even like free online donation platforms now for nonprofits, that please make sure that you aren't losing donors just because you have a difficult donation page. So, okay. Ooh, how are we doing on time? Close. I was close to an hour. So finishing up here, 2 main concerns I always hear about marketing from nonprofits are that it takes too much time or it costs too much money. And it's just too hard to measure what is the return on investment, both of those things, both your time and your money. So the key really is focusing on what works. Consistent, mission-aligned messaging on the right platforms, the right places to reach the people that you want to talk to. marketing doesn't have to be expensive or to be effective. A strategic, intentional investment in outreach, in the right tools, in expert guidance, all of those things can provide significant long-term returns in donor retention and engagement, and that all leads to overall financial stability. But even beyond finances, it just leads to long-term resilience for your organization. So I will pop in the chat in just a moment here, the marketing strategy template, and it'll also go out via email with the recording. So take it, use it. I would love to see you use it. And as you fill this out for your organization, you go through it and you set up like your marketing strategy and plan. Again, remember, it's a living document. You want to go back and you'll adjust as you go and you find out what's working, what doesn't. But fill it out and send it to me. I will definitely reply with some feedback or some insights. If you are trying to fill it out and you have a question, you're unsure, like send me an email, ask me. I am happy to answer here. I assure you, like this is a lot of information, but you don't have to overhaul everything at once. You can start with one small thing, or you can start with, okay, today we're going to do this. Today we're going to start working on our marketing strategy. So I'd love to hear if there's one small change or one thing that you know that you could do this week to get started on improving your marketing and fundraising strategy. Yeah, let's hear that. Or if you have any other questions, if you are, I know some of you who are here live already are clients that work with me, but if you are watching this on the recording and you'd like more support with strategy or hands-on guidance, I'd love to continue the conversation. Feel free to reach out via email or the contact form on my website. You'll see both of those here. Again, I will respond and would love to talk to you more. So one thing to take away from today: clear, mission-driven messaging is the foundation of every successful nonprofit. So use it as your guide in all of your communications. It will get you through a crisis, and it will also lead to growth. So let me see if anybody has any questions here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I can also grab the link. So this is a link. It should prompt you to, let's see, should prompt you to make a copy of this Google Doc. I wanted to make it so you could type directly into the document to use it instead of having to print out the pages and like handwrite it in and, have to squeeze everything that you want to write into one tiny box or something. So that I will send out a PDF form of it too, in case the Google Doc thing doesn't work for me or for you, but let me know if you have questions about it. But are there any questions or comments, anything that I can answer now for you? Or
Erin, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so you talked about the importance of metrics when determining the best route for communication. What metrics should nonprofits be paying attention to? Because you can go out to your Facebook business platform and they talk about reach, organic reach, number of shares. When you send out mass mailings, bounced mailing, open mailings, how many have been forwarded? So like from just an overarching standpoint, what metrics are the most important and which ones can you kind of just disregard? The data isn't necessarily important.
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a lot of metrics that are just interesting, or there are the vanity metrics like, oh, we have this many followers, look at us. That's so great. Those are things, especially like the followers, where obviously you'd like to see an upward trajectory on that number, but the overall number is not that important. The things that I think both on social media and in email, and to some extent on website too, the things that are important to track are the things that are, how are people engaging with you? So on social media, that looks like that now, like on the Meta platforms, they call it interactions. They change the terminology and stuff, but like right now, I think what they're using is interactions. And that's basically like how many likes, comments, shares, all of that, did you get for that post? Pay attention to that. Like how many interactions are we getting? What types of content is getting the most interaction? Because that tells you a lot about what people are responding to. What drives me crazy that the meta platforms do not just give you is engagement rate. Some of the other platforms like Twitter, X, and LinkedIn, both they calculate it for you. On Meta, you have to go in and figure it out yourself. But basically, it's like if you look at how, what is our, the number of interactions that we had for this post divided by the reach. So the total number of people who saw it, that will give you your engagement rate for the post. And so it's kind of a headache, but it's not hard. It's not hard math to do. And you can go through and get kind of a sense of your overall engagement rate and then which types of posts are getting the best engagement rate. I think that's definitely worth your time, even though you do have to do a little manual calculation, because it tells you, again, like what people are interacting with. On email, it's similar. Like you want to see how are people engaging. You can't see as much. It's not as granular on your email generally as it is on social media, but you can see, did they open it? Because that tells you they're interested. I mean, maybe they were just hooked by the subject line. Maybe they really like your organization, but it tells you, hey, people are opening this. That's a good sign. And so you want to track what that open rate is and then click rates too, because hopefully in every email you've got some kind of call to action or somewhere that you're directing them. And so you want to see how many people, out of those people that opened it, how many are clicking somewhere. Website metrics is a whole other thing, of course. But again, on websites, I'm looking for like those key engagements or, did somebody make a donation? How long did they stay on our site? Or how many pages did they click through? What pages are they clicking to? Because that gives you, it's kind of an indicator of like, what are people most interested in? So those are some of the key digital metrics. Of course, there are lots of other things that you can track. And there are a lot of the things that you get on like grant applications, like how many hours, like how many staff hours were spent on this type of thing. So those are a little more individual per organization, but generally speaking, those are the digital metrics that I pay the most attention to.
And then a follow-up question,
Yeah.
because so many nonprofits do a lot of marketing on the social media platforms, specifically Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Post boosting. Lots of us have small marketing budgets. What has been your experience with ROI on boosting posts?
That's a really good question too. So I, for the most part, encourage most organizations not to even consider putting money behind posts until they have a marketing plan and messaging strategy in place, because you want to know, who you're talking to, what it is you're saying. You want to like make sure everything's directing back to those overall organizational goals. But if you have all of that in place, you feel like, yeah, I'm really strong on our strategy. We just want to, pay a little bit of money to get this in front of some more eyes. Using the boost button on the meta platforms is a little bit of a game of Russian roulette. Sometimes you get it in front of the right people and it's really great. Other times, they will always deliver in some ways. Like you might get a lot of likes or you might get a lot of reach, but it might be like people on the other side of the world who, sometimes they're targeting AI is great and sometimes it totally misses. So the actual boost button is a bit of it's kind of a crapshoot, but if you go into the ads manager and set up ads that way, like if there's an event that I want to promote or, something, even if it's not an event, if it's an awareness type of thing, like we really want to just get more eyes on what we're doing and to know that we exist as an organization. Setting up an ad like from scratch in the ad manager is more reliable when it comes to targeting. It's a whole new thing to learn. Obviously, like it's a new skill set, but if you are ready to like spend more consistently, then I think it's worth learning. There's also, the Google ad grant, which again, a whole new skill set, but you get $10,000 of free advertising from Google a month as a nonprofit. So there's lots of stipulations and rules behind what you have to do to be able to use that, but it's a thing and it can be really helpful if you have the capacity to invest the time in that. So
Thank you.
yes. Any other questions that I can answer? Otherwise, I really appreciate you guys getting on, hanging with me for this long. Like, I seriously could talk about all of this forever and ever. I'm like, okay, I must print my notes so I don't go on for hours and hours. But hopefully there's at least a few takeaways that will be helpful for you. And yeah, feel free to reach out if you have more questions. All right. Thanks, Noreen. Thank you guys. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day.